Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into something totally fascinating, the exact intersection where graphic design, human psychology, and ecological activism completely collide. Seriously, if you've ever looked at an environmental ad and felt just inexplicably moved by it without quite knowing why, well, you are definitely in the right place. Let's try something. I want you to vividly picture something for a second. Think about an ad where the actual letters aren't just printed in your standard black ink, but instead they look like they're intricately carved straight out of rough tree bark. Or imagine a massive headline where the words themselves look like they're actually formed by thick, slick oil or maybe rippling flowing water. See, that's not just some random, clever artistic choice to make a poster look cool. It's actually a highly calculated, deeply psychological design strategy called natural form typography, and it literally changes the way our brains process information. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for today. First, we're going to look at the biophilic principle. Second, a deep dive case study on the WWF. Third, we'll contrast that with a case study on Greenpeace. And finally, we'll wrap up with how all of this drives true emotional engagement. All right, part one. The biophilic principle, why nature-inspired fonts resonate. So what's actually happening in our heads here? It all comes down to something called the biophilia hypothesis. This was popularized by the biologist Edward O. Wilson, and it basically says that humans have this innate, fundamentally built-in tendency to seek out connections with nature and other living things. It's like we're biologically hardwired from thousands of years of evolution to recognize and immediately respond to natural patterns. So when designers use natural form typography, they aren't just picking a pretty font from a drop-down menu. They are practically hijacking our evolutionary programming. Think about the difference between your standard geometric fonts and organic forms. Those cold, hard geometric shapes, the fonts you typically see in a dry textbook or some corporate memo. Our brains process those super efficiently, sure, but with literally zero emotional engagement. They're just rigid and purely functional. But the second we switch over to organic forms, letters that maybe mimic the swoop of a vine or the rugged texture of tree bark, we completely bypass that cold, analytical logic. They instantly feel way less threatening, and they immediately activate our mind's deep connection to the living world. The message literally becomes a piece of nature itself. Moving on to part two, case study, WWF Beyond the Panda. Now, the World Wildlife Fund, or WWF, absolutely excels at this concept of urgent beauty. Take their Give a Hand to Wildlife campaign. They used biomimicry, where human hands were painted with this jaw-dropping photorealistic detail to look like endangered tigers or eagles, and then physically positioned to form the actual letters and shapes. I mean, it visually screams, hey, their fate is in our hands. Or look at their Earth Hour campaigns, where the typography is actually made from glowing constellations of stars in a dark night sky. It beautifully links the simple act of turning off your lights to the vast beauty of the whole universe. They've also done this with glowing, fading light bulb filaments to push electricity conservation. They're using these stunning, totally unforgettable images to visually connect our human responsibility directly to the cause. But what's really interesting here is how WWF took this a step further. They actually turned typography into pure data visualization with their population font. The physical thickness of every single letter is tied directly to the remaining population of a specific endangered species. So if a species has a relatively healthy population, the font stays nice and thick, very bold. But if that animal is critically endangered, the letters become terrifyingly thin. Almost invisible on the page. It mirrors the population decline perfectly. And this all builds to a really chilling conclusion. 0. Because when those dangerously thin letters finally fade away completely, it represents total extinction. You aren't just reading a sad statistic anymore. You are visually witnessing the fading away of a species in real time. The visual style itself is the data. So we have the WWF using this really subtle, data-driven approach built on urgent beauty. But on the other side of the coin, we have Greenpeace. And Greenpeace opts for stark reality. They use direct, visceral, and highly confrontational shock value to smash their message home. Which brings us to part 3, case study Greenpeace, confrontational and organic visuals. A truly legendary example of their approach is the Greenpeace tree poster. From a distance, you're just looking at a really detailed macro illustration of this massive, beautiful tree. But when you look closer, and I mean really inspect it, you realize the entire image is actually constructed from hundreds of tiny micro words. And those words are not pleasant. They are detailing the severe, brutal threats of deforestation and ecological collapse. It is such a brilliant dual viewing experience. The natural form typography acts as both the beautiful image of nature and the deeply unsettling information that's currently threatening it. It pulls you in with the beauty and then immediately hits you with the harsh reality. And Greenpeace absolutely does not stop at tiny text. They frequently lean into highly confrontational imagery. In their anti-whaling campaigns, for example, they've used text that mimics the shape of a massive whale, but it's heavily dripping with incredibly graphic, visceral blood. It's meant to make you deeply uncomfortable because, well, the topic itself is brutal. And for corporate oil spills, they don't just put out a statement complaining about the pollution, they literally spell out the name of the polluting corporation using photorealistic, thick black oil sludge. By rendering a brand's actual name in slick, toxic oil, Greenpeace forces this inescapable direct visual connection right between the responsible entity and the environmental damage they caused.
All right, part 4, driving emotional engagement, the synthesis. So what does this all mean? The crucial point here is perfectly captured in a quote from our source material. In every case, the style of the typography is the message. When designers pull this technique off effectively, the medium essentially becomes indistinguishable from the argument itself. You're no longer separating the words you're reading from the pictures you're looking at. They fuse into this one unified, holistic blow to your senses, speaking directly to your innate, evolutionary love of nature. If you want to truly drive that kind of emotional engagement, there's actually a specific blueprint these designers follow. Step 1, ditch the synthetic, mass-produced visual constraints, so absolutely no standard rigid corporate fonts. Step 2, align the visual texture directly with the ecological subject, whether that happens to be a beautiful constellation of stars or a puddle of toxic oil sludge. And finally, step 3, by combining those things, you instantly trigger the viewer's innate biophilia. It's a very clear, step-by-step technique that elevates what would otherwise be just a totally ignorable text message into a powerful, instinctual call to action, one that you literally feel in your gut before your brain has even finished reading the sentence. So, I want to leave you with this provocative thought to chew on. We live in a world where we are constantly, relentlessly surrounded by branding, advertising, and corporate messaging. If the medium truly is the message, take a real look around you today. What does the typography and the visual identity of your absolute favorite brand actually say about its relationship with our planet? Are they communicating a rigid, mass-produced distance, or are they signaling organic connection and true responsibility? Think about it. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer.